Tag team back again. 2025 showdown in Global 1940. We'll be playing version 3.6 of the Omega rules here in this game, which is a couple new additions, a couple tweaks to the rules that we've just agreed upon here before the game. They are minor updates. They're one additional bonus for Germany and the addition of the ability to cause damage to one's own facilities. So very minor tweaks, house rule-ish type of stuff. Otherwise, identical to the Omega 3.5 rules that came before it that you saw in the previous games. So without further ado, let's see what we can come up with new here this time around. Halfway through turn one, the Axis have initiated their strategy, and it is one focused on the Eurasian landmass. The Japanese have not gone with the J1. Fair disclosure, I was balancing two different strategic ideas for this game, one of which was going to be completely different than the other, and so I went with this one. This is the Japan's focusing on China this turn, as is often seen, except this time we're starting with an air strip being built in G-hole, along with some artillery, or not artillery, but mech and tank there in Japan. See a bunch of planes left over in Manchuria. And this one was a little different. So this is not something I expected. Chris split his stack up, put 6 guys in Siberia. So the Japanese devoted everything they could get there to wiping that out. All their Air Force, amphibious assaults, bombers, the whole works, and took care of that. But the main force there obviously still in Buriatra. What makes this game most distinct from others, though, is the whole mad dash to Russia strategy that the Germans are employing. So the Germans bought all mechs and a tank and were able to focus entirely on going to Russia, broke the peace with Russia first turn, poured everything they could into eastern Poland, ended with 6 infantry and 6 tanks. Of course, the worst roll they could have gotten, because both those Russians hit and lost. The 2 that Para dropped in ended up with a total of 6 and 6. The Russians coming back and throwing everything that could possibly reach there very aggressively back into eastern Poland, consistent with what the odds were predicted to be. It was a very even fight down to the very last rolls, where the 2 remaining aircraft missed and were hit by the tanks. So there's just a little nub of the German contingent left, but at least they are still there. Now, don't cry for Russia, because the same thing happened to Germany, though, over here. So I broke what has been a long-standing taboo with us of never throwing aircraft into Paris, so that the AA gun doesn't shoot them down. And I thought, we're going to try something bold and risky this time. Well, it was bold, but it was awfully risky, and 2 of those AA shots hit. Ooh, that hurt, and leaving so little coverage that I had to ultimately take a hit on a plane so that this one remaining artillery could survive and take Paris. That hurt. I knew that was going to be risky, and it didn't pay off too well for the Germans. Lost 3 aircraft in the opening move, but Russia lost their air force as well. So time will tell how that balances out. But the Germans have pointed their guns towards the east, and now we need to see what the UK is going to do with this embarrassment of riches that they have in the North Atlantic. Beginning of turn 2, we see how the Axis have responded, or the Allies rather, have responded to the Axis maneuvers. There is a little bit of U.S. investment in the Atlantic, but not much. As to be expected, the lone destroyer picked some subs to knock out, and it was actually closer than it deserved to be, but the destroyer prevailed and knocked out the 2 subs that were there. The UK, as might be expected when they're left with all their navy and nobody in Norway, decided to take that navy and occupy Norway. Dropped a couple of dudes in there, getting rid of the German convoy sub at the same time. Of course, as you saw in the Axis turn, Germany barely captured Paris, which means they were surrounded by Frenchmen eager to take back their capital. That put Italy in a real bind. So, as always happens, UK did a Taranto into 97, had great results there, still had a full carrier of 2 planes on it and all the accompanying naval units. So Italy was in a bit of a bind, having a lot to do, kind of make up for Germany's slack a little bit there in Southern Europe and position itself where it wants to be. Had to make some choices. Went into Southern just like last year with double the units and almost lost again, just like they did last year with only 1 artillery left over. And so the Frenchmen end up paratrooping in and bringing everything back into southern France and taking it back again. Under our house rules, that factory has changed hands twice, so it's now up to max damage, having taken 50% every time that it's conquered. Elsewhere, though, the Italians did at least not half bad. The Italians themselves took back 97, losing the Navy that was in 95, but only 1 plane. That was helpful. Landing those 2 planes in, or they lost the bomber actually, which is, a bummer, but kept those 2 planes specifically because those 2 planes needed to land in Paris and protect Paris from the French on turn 1. That's just a sad commentary in and of itself. Italy did sacrifice a transport to take Gibraltar, thus saving the lives of these 2 subs. And the French did what they could to return the favor and take that transport back. UK did also take out the Italian fleet here in 96. Honestly, there was a tactical mistake on my part. I should have parked at least one of my planes, or just one of my planes, in Southern Europe to at least create more of a scramble threat in 97, because I didn't do that. He knew I wasn't going to scramble, and so he was able to spare some planes and send those into 96. I had taken out the cruiser just to make that harder, the cruiser in 91, to make it harder to dominate the Med like he does every time. But if I had left that German plane, he probably would have sent those planes to 97, and those ships in 96 may have lived to see another day. There you go. Anyway, UK otherwise doing what it normally does, cleaning up the Horn of Africa from the Italian scourge, positioning itself to occupy all of the Middle East, and spreading out thusly. We have, did you do those non-coms there? They're marked in India?
Yeah.
Okay. So consolidating a bit in Calcutta, setting up for that Middle Eastern move as per usual. Let's talk about predictable. We have the Anzacs taking Java, getting some free money, while the Americans, as we mentioned earlier, spending most of their time in the Pacific, most of that build there, California, building up a nice little nut in Hawaii, seeking to intimidate the Japanese as we enter into turn 2. Halfway through turn 2, the Axis have continued their Eurasian focus here, with the Germans not plunging quite as far into Russia as I'd like, but the setback from last turn forced us to mostly consolidate the stacks here in eastern Poland, but spending all their money on more fast movers, tanks and mechs. Baltic states were also taken, as was Vyborg and Karelia, but the stack there in Leningrad decided not to go without a fight. Fought back, took both of those, performed quite handily there in Viborg, wiping out that stack of 7 dudes that was there, kind of opening up that whole Nordic peninsula now, which is a tad concerning, but again, sticking with Chris's philosophy of the best defense being a good offense, and it is being very offensive indeed to all the Axis sensibilities. But we've still got a ton here going on. Germany taking Normandy, also sending its subs and bombers, performed quite effectively to wipe out the ineffectual French fleet that was there in the Med. So there's that. Chris starting to pull back the rest, though, building infantry mostly in Russia, pulling back what's left of the Siberian stack here, while the Japanese continue their westward march across China, focusing on building primarily land units this time around, transport, some tanks, and upgrading the airstrip in Jihol to an air base for purposes that shall unfold in later turns perhaps, but now we'll see how the Allies roll out their forces here on the rest of turn 2. As we reach the beginning of turn 3, the strategic arcs of each country are coming into closer focus. The U.S. here is, while diddling around in the Atlantic a little bit, not really, needing to do much since the UK has such a nice navy there. We see it poking the bear a little bit in Europe, bringing that fleet down from Norway, dropping the 2 guys that it could into Normandy and having them excommunicated by the Italians. Italians having a decent turn, amazingly enough, achieving their Mediterranean bonus, and they're controlling 3 strategic territories, Gibraltar, southern France, and Greece. The latter 2 being taken this turn, as well as kicking the UK out of Normandy. So they performed pretty well, moving every piece that they could on the board. Not that they have a ton left, but, making okay money for now for Italy. But UK now investing in transports and the dudes to drop with them. So their interference in European affairs will get more substantial as time goes on. Otherwise, the UK, following a pretty familiar playbook, building a minor factory in Egypt, swinging around its little navy here, taking the Middle East on turn 2, like it always does. One other thing that went Italy's way was that UK's Strat bomber tried to do a strategic bombing raid on northern Italy and was shot down. The AA luck is insane this game for all countries, so really souring us on that strategic bombing maneuver. The Anzakistanis have actually declared war on their turn. The UK Pacific did not take the bait to attack Japan, did not feel that necessary, felt it should focus on the Middle East instead. But the Anzakistanis have done so just so they can get their ridiculous amount of money, all the bonuses that come with that, and with them occupying 2 of the money islands and one of the other islands, getting all their bonuses now, and so they're raking in more cash than most other nations on the board, and that is dumb. The Americans continue to build up their nice little fleet in the Hawaiian Sea Zone, getting in here to turn 3, where they're going to be able to start operating on a war footing as well. Can the Axis get ahead of the curve enough to... Well, halfway through turn 3, and the Axis plan continues to roll forward. It was a positive turn for the Axis forces. Germany pushed its stack forward into western Ukraine, with the Russians wisely pulling back towards Russia. The Russians did, as they were positioned to do, roll up into Finland, which gives them some bonus money, figuring that that's probably their highest and best use to try to earn some income for the motherland, since they're out of range of Moscow. There was an attempt to come in on Poland. Rolls did not go well. The AA gun did shoot down the paratroopers, and they were pushed back from Poland. Germany going hardcore into this strategy, which is obviously focused on getting to Russia as quickly as possible, building 4 air units in Germany, leaving Western wide open. There was a naval attack on the German Navy here as well by the Russians. That also did not go well. So Germany being able to repulse some of the resistance and push itself forward even closer to Moscow. Now that's 20-something dudes stacked up in there. That is a sizable force, but there is a not insignificant stack of German dudes headed that way as well. On the Japanese front, we see similarly the Japanese forces barreling through northern China as quickly as possible and in as much force as possible. The airstrip rather in Jihul had been upgraded to an air base last time, allowing it under the Omega rules to paratroop 3 spaces, which gets us more guys into Kansu. And so we've got the vast majority of the Japanese land forces, which is really all Japan's been buying, climbing through northern China. Bought some air units for Japan as well this time, strats and tacks, and starting to form the lines here as we prepare for what the Americans are going to be able to do in a couple turns. The Anzac Astanis, as we said last time, declared war on Japan in order to get their bonuses, so they got their transports sunk as a result. That's probably a worthy trade for them because they're rolling in the cash now. But and we were tempted, sorely tempted, to come in here with Japan into Shan State. Chose to play it more conservatively. We did take an amphibious assault into Kwangtung, which hit everything, but they both hit the 2 land units that I sent in. So that was an even trade. Did not take control of that this turn. The French had rolled up into Kwangsi, and we took that back. But so we've got some defensive positioning here in Southeast Asia, while the main force continues to roll through northern China. So how will the Allies build some momentum here in the rest of turn 3? It is the beginning of turn 4, and things are getting gruesome. The U.S., of course, is now in the war, and as you can see from this angle, it's not in the Atlantic very much. Got a, modest contingent of transports there, ready to ship some dudes eastward, but obviously the main force is going to be out in the Pacific. So we've got, look at that, the French crews are coming back to the rescue. We've got a little bit of Atlantic incursion there. We've got some folks coming up the Red Sea here, clutch UK turn, kind of not only positioning itself on both sides of Italy, but more importantly for the outcome of the game, just doing what Chris does when Russia's under threat, which is just making a crap ton of British planes and flying them all the way up to Moscow. Figuring out some interesting moves, have to go across this sea zone, and he's got a little juke move over here where he's going to slip and slide these planes to get them into Moscow next turn. I think we're looking at, a total of 12 planes that are likely to be there by the time the Germans arrive. So doing everything we desperately can to reinforce Moscow as the Germans just come barreling through. The Italians making a fair amount of money still, and as it happened, because Chris went barreling into Moscow, as frankly everybody else in the game seems to be doing. Germany is pretty much left alone. There is all quiet on the Western Front there for the time being anyway. Yeah, we're all geared up and ready to go on that side of the board. You saw, of course, the Indians pouring everything they could plane-wise. They're also kind of gearing up a bit on the ground, coming in this way, reinforcing Malaya rather than taking the bait and going into Southeast Asia. We got the Anzakistanis just building crazy navies as they are wont to do. It's a battleship there in Sydney, and the rest of their fleet up in the Hawaiian sea zone, reinforcing everything that the Americans have been building. You know, that's 2 more carriers over there just waiting to get filled with lots and lots of Yankees to head over to Sea Zone 6 perhaps, or somewhere else. Time will tell. And the Axis have 1 turn left to get ready for it. Well, it's another day and it's halfway through turn 4. The Axis have committed themselves entirely here to the objective of their overall strategy, which I can now say I know by the code name Brooklyn, standing for no sleep till Moscow. So you see the Axis pincers here converging on the city of Moscow. That's a nice little visual, honestly. But, you know, time remains to tell whether those 2 teeth will close. But the Germans have executed to the best of their ability here, having their stack now on the doors of Moscow there in Bryansk, with a healthy air contingent behind them, both in Germany and elsewhere there in Ukraine. We're able to swing back, knock the guys out in Baltics there, but Russians not going quietly. Their stack is there in Norway with the British, obviously colluding in some manner. Holding on to Leningrad and Ukraine, Volgograd, all their factories still building guys and planes here in Moscow, anticipating brushing off the runways for all the many, many British fellows that are going to arrive later this turn, and for one last glorious stand in Moscow. Europe quiet for the time being, and for the rest of Asia, we see Japan, you know, inching forward up north while retreating a bit, strategically repositioning in the south, taking those empty territories as well as Borneo. Figured that was a worthy sacrifice for that transport there, and then assembling in Sea Zone 6 to hopefully hold off the Allied threat here for the rest of turn 4. Well, we just finished turn 4, last half of it, and that was probably the one with the most critical choices of the game, because the UK needed to decide how to most effectively crimp Germany's style, while Italy had to decide how to most effectively respond to that. Now, UK did everything that it possibly could, and it is quite a lot. That's bringing the fleet up to activate Yugoslavia rather than attacking directly. Also, pouring as many units into Europe as possible in the Western Front, which again was quite a few. They took Western Germany, they took Denmark. You see they still hang on to Holland and Normandy. And then Italy, as it has every turn in this game, has had like 10 things to do and the ability to only do 3 of them. So had to choose very carefully how it was going to respond. It certainly anticipated these moves, but doesn't mean that it has the ability to counteract each one of them. So what it chose to do, rather than attacking Yugoslavia, rather than bolstering Paris, We took back Western. We nipped a couple transports that were left in 112 and landed some planes in Germany, beefing up the heartland of Germany a bit, throwing up some roadblocks and options and whatnot, pulling the tank back, doing what it can to kind of cover the ground, ceding France to the Allies, which means we're going to see some liberation next turn. Question is, will it be enough for the Allies to turn the tide? And that will only be answered after we have this big throwdown in Moscow on turn 5. In the Pacific, where the Allies have so far been investing most of their time and resources, we have some convoying here going on, not to get me any rewards from my little adventure in Borneo, as well as a continued naval buildup in the Hawaiian sea zone, and a lot of tension building there. But for all the tension that there is in the Pacific, it's here in Moscow where the game's going to really take a turn or even be decided here on turn 5. Well, here it is, halfway through turn 5, and the no sleep till Moscow strategy has achieved its aims. Pleased to say, from an Axis perspective, the Germans, consistent with the odds prediction, were able to take Russia with a handy amount of stuff left over. All elected to leave 6 tanks. There was obviously a number of aircraft that lived as well. Here's some of the bombers even making their way back downtown to Berlin, building as much as we can in Germany proper, trying to hold on to that nut long enough to reinforce it with the money achieved from Russia. Russia's survivors hold up in the Urals there, the infantry from the Siberian area and the 3 tanks that were making it back to Norway. The Japanese were able to wrap that up. So there are some Russians in Norway, and that's about it right now. I think there's a sub out there, the Red October, is still floating around. So that's the story for Russia at this point. China is still certainly in play. China got a huge stack down here, now being reinforced by the Indians, and Japan spent most of its turn kind of reorienting its forces to come down southward. Obviously, big stack there, no longer in that fight. Aircraft kind of repositioning themselves, building a major in Kwangtung. That's what that represents under the Omega rules. That's possible if it's controlled in value 3, which it is. And we're doing our best to reinforce that while defending the homeland from this enormo stack over here. And let's see how the Allies bounce back from the loss of Moscow here on the rest of turn 5. Well, it's turn 6, and the Allies have recaptured some momentum, it appears. The British, of course, the heroes of the turn, because they're collecting 60-something IPCs. You'll see that they not only liberated France, which gets them some automatic units, but took what you don't see, which is northern Italy, western Germany, all sorts of good stuff. The Italians, doing their yeoman's work here as they have the whole game, took back northern Italy and western Germany. Really debated on the northern Italy thing because now we're stretched out a bit, but the hope was to take western Germany so that the Germans could build there. Of course, something you hardly ever see is the French fighting back with their automatically liberated units and now occupying West Germany for the French Empire. So that is an unfortunate setback to the Axis momentum here. We have Allies piling up in the Med, almost about to take the North Africa token. We did take the Liberate Paris token, which got UK the tech of propaganda, which is one that the UK always seems to get and is uniquely beneficial for them since they have two economies. Germany, by the way, when taking Moscow, got the Blitz tactics technology, which is ever so useful since Germany does not own a single mech unit on the board. So, yeah, that's unfortunate. In Asia, you know, the combined allied forces continue to pile up in Yunnan, taking Vietnam, freeing all sorts of territories for the French, who are now collecting income, collecting almost as much as Germany is, which is absurd. The American fleet doing something and taking the Caroline Islands, followed by the Anzacastanis, who took Palau, and Borneo by the Indians. So, yeah, there is a lot of resurgence from the Allies, and it's going to take some very clever and lucky play from the Axis to maintain an edge. Halfway through turn 6, the Axis have done their best to regain some momentum here. So the Germans, after agonizing through several potential build strategies with all that Soviet money, ended up investing in some mechs and artillery, primarily taking advantage of that Blitz tactics technology, as well as several bombers. Got 3 bombers, a couple tanks in there with some extra money. Had to fix some damage on some factories in order to pull that off. Threw some, just a couple infantry and some ported by bombers into Western Germany. Took out the French that were there, did not occupy the territory. Again, if there's an ally that's going to hold that territory, I'd rather it be the French, because they don't have as much money to spend, and they've got to spend it all to fix the factories, so that slows things down a little bit. Gathering some IPCs in the fatherland here, but time will tell if it's enough. Meanwhile, the Japanese also kind of coalescing around their problem, which is down here in Southeast Asia, and bringing Navy and air units, building an airstrip there, consolidating their strength now in the south rather than in the north. Also anticipating the power projection here by this American and Australian Navy. So, time will tell how the Allies respond. Well, we've reached the beginning of turn 7, and as you can see, the Allies are coming out in force. As Chris is wont to do, he's building up an enormous fleet in a blow-up box, and biding his time until he has an unstoppable invasion force, rather than taking too many pot shots, although he's taken a fair number of pot shots as well. You can see now the Mediterranean fleet skedaddling to get into that blow-up box. Chris does love himself a good blow-up box. Most of the German front here is empty, or at least underpopulated, but there certainly is a land contingent of the Allies building up in Normandy, including the French, who are actually building into Normandy. Italians traded northern Italy for all the good that does. And on the Asian front, we see the Chinese stack skedoodling over here to get away from some of the Japanese land forces, while the Americans managed to squeak some transports through, do some island hopping, and get a victory token out of it, earning them super subs. Yeah, super subs, which is handy since they have a stack of them right there now. The UK, incidentally, also got another victory token in Northern Africa, which got them improved production as well. So the Allies are at 3 victory tokens now to the Axis's 1, actually on the cusp of a legitimate victory under the rules. But the Axis aren't done yet. as we enter turn 7. Now halfway through turn 7, going into about our 13th hour of the day, playing this second half of the game. Germany has, what has it done? Stepped out a little bit, took Western Germany back, expanding out a little bit on the corners here, picking up some territories, pushing out a little bit, applying pressure where it can, which is not too far. Japan, on the other hand, doing virtually the same thing, pushing out a little bit here towards the Middle East, debating on how much to do with that, but swinging some tanks back this way as well, building up a bit down here, repositioning the bombers where they should have been in the first place. This is a mess of a blow-up box just because it's been difficult to figure out exactly where to put all those guys, but they are essentially where they were before. Build a couple more carriers so we have some parity in those, and we'll see how the Allies react here. Well, it's the beginning of turn 8, and the Allies have continued to build up. What can I say? They most notably have wiped out the German fleet finally. The Bismarck is at the bottom. Interestingly, the Italians, not often you see this, but the Italians have now reconquered Paris only because the Allies left it open. Frankly, I think they wanted me to do that. But biding their time, as you know, they are wont to do, building up their forces until they can strike. UK spent a lot of time consolidating the Middle East here, reading the tea leaves and seeing Axis forces knocking on the door here, building a minor factory, everything else, investing some time down there. Also doing quite a few surgical strikes. We see both the air bases in Jihol and Kansu gone now. Little strikes of opportunity, and once you liberate a Chinese territory, the facilities go away, so that's what happened. The Chinese/Indian stack has also moved into Quichao, taking the opportunity to wipe out the mini stack that was there. It's a sizable force, and actually took out more than its odds of Chinese units with them, but still quite a bit of buildup there. And of course, with the air bases gone, that reduces the number of counter strikers that Japan could throw back. Otherwise, we continue our little naval dance of death in the Pacific and invite the Axis to do something about it to break the logjam here in turn 8. Well, good morning on the third actual day of us playing this game as we launch halfway through turn 8. The Germans very slowly stepping forward, stuck a guy into Holland in order to plug a little bit of that gap as they continue to build up. You'll see some radar towers there in Germany, which under the Omega rules give a little bit of a bonus to intercepting planes, which is something Germany's probably going to need soon with all those bombers headed its way. Meanwhile, it's pulling back a little bit into the Caucasus in light of this resurgent British force down in the Middle East. But things actually happened on the Chinese side of things. You'll see some Japanese folks coming up to kind of counteract the British incursion up there. But more significantly, that huge stack that I've been chasing around the whole game in Quichao, having been drawn into range of the planes, has now been wiped. Now that, of course, required the sacrifice of many noble aircraft pilots. Fortunately, a fair number of them are left. Again, a lot of IPC loss there. But in exchange for wiping off that stack and giving me a little bit better situation on the ground anyway, But the trade-off with that, and of course we repelled the invaders in G-hole as well, but the trade-off with that, of course, is that the fleet has to go hide in C-Zone 6, guarded by some blockers there again, and now gives the U.S. Anzac stack, naval stack in the Carolines, several more options than what they had before, changing that dynamic in the Pacific. And the Allies' response on turn 8 will be interesting to see. All right, it's now turn 9. The Allies have inexorably moved forward in gobbling up Europe, taking back southern Paris and Holland, as one would expect. The Brits also rolled into North Italy, and Italy managed to take that back and build a couple things. Actually got a bonus because the German subs had taken out the one surface warship in the Med, but now there's another one courtesy of the French. So $4, I think, Italy collected with all these subs convoying them. That's the typical Italian death spiral. Just a little bit of movement up top and below. The Middle Eastern contingent starting to accumulate here, with some Indian support stepping up into what was the fatherland. A little bit of incursion into China, but there's not much ground presence there anymore for the Allies. Of course, the main story on this side of the board is the Pacific navies, and as one may expect, the Anzacistanis continue to just supply battleships every turn and other navy that's coming on up. And the Allies have done such a good job at island hopping that the Japanese are out of options and sending things to plug them because there's nowhere to land. But the navies now are positioned thusly, with the Japanese in C-Zone 6. This whole combined U.S. Anzac stack is here in C-Zone 17, with a whole contingent of super subs protected by an Anzac blocker here in the Hawaiian Sea Zone. So things are about to come to a head here, if not this turn, then soon, as we enter turn 9. Halfway through turn 9, Axis are bringing the fight to the Allies, not holding back. So Paris has changed hands once again. Just an infantry holding it each time, because it's kind of a no man's land between the two forces. These two zones have built up even further, and in the Nordic Peninsula, nice roll for the Germans. Were able to get in there with Tax and Strats and the two land units that were in range and wipe out the UK stack that was there. Not a strategic move by any point, but certainly a tactical one that kind of set back that advance a little bit. Similarly, we're building up here in Volgograd as the Middle Easterners start to climb their way north here. In Japan, a heartbreak. This lone Chinese holdout managed to hold off two land units and a strat bomber in order to keep Szechuan. Japan successfully absorbed the rest of mainland China, and was really looking forward to that extra bonus I would have gotten. But alas, that's not going to happen. Meanwhile, we've built up this stack here in C-Zone 6, dropping the critical blocker to keep the super subs in Hawaii out for one more turn. And with the transports on the way from San Francisco, we'll see the rest of the Allied plan manifest here on turn 9. Beginning of turn 10, and the Allies are, well, they're in a similar place to where they've been, just with a lot more dudes on those places. So you see a steady patient buildup here in Normandy of just an enormous number of Axis pieces. Still a no man's zone here with Allied pieces now holding the front. Northern Italy still held in U.S. hands by the end of the turn because Italy has run out of juice to be taking it back. They spent their last remaining dollars on a pillbox there. Coastal artillery, whatever you want to call it a pillbox under our rules. Gives a little extra bonus just in case some amphibious attackers come in. We got this annoying little dude walking up southern Europe there. While the rest of the Brits and Americans all pile into Norway. Down here, we've got a consolidation in the Middle East, not quite yet ready to step into Russian territory. While in the Pacific, we actually have a retrenchment. Instead of piling into Sea Zone 6, the Americans and Anzacs have pulled back to the Carolines. You'll see, of course, this time they're reinforced by quite a few transports, both in Hawaii and in the Carolines. So posing a different kind of threat this time to land on the mainland. Coinciding, of course, with the fact that this is probably going to be the turn Japan finally gets its China bonus, and the turn that there just aren't many Indians. So obviously the Allies over here have some landing in mind. Where that will be, though, remains to be seen. So it's time now for the Axis to prepare themselves and try to inch forward just a bit more. Halfway through turn 10, and the Axis had a pretty decent go of it. The Germans accomplishing what they wanted to do, taking the front again in Belgium and France, and then taking care of northern Italy so that it could slide down into southern Italy to reinforce that as much as possible. If you see two Italian planes there, that's because they were supposed to have been moved at the end of the last round, and we moved them. So Italy's not making any money, at least didn't last turn because of all these convoys, and needed the German support to reinforce from this threatened invasion over here by the Americans. So we opened that up and spread the Germans around as far as possible. Finally, healing some damage in Western as well so that we could add to that. And with green chips being 10, we see that we're steadily amping up the stack. Of course, the Allies are doing the same and adding planes and whatnot as well. So remains to be seen who's on the right edge of that. But the Germans swinging down a little bit, Russians swinging over the last Russian contingent, just taking some free territory there. And in Asia, we have finally conquered China at turn 10. Getting the Asia bonus, but then also losing that and more to a couple of convoying U.S. subs. But the Japanese spent all their money on destroyers this time in response to the Americans' reliance on their super subs. So with that Axis positioning, it's now time for the Allies to do their worst. Can you believe we're at the top of turn 11? The back and forth continues. The Atlantic fleet has gotten bigger with the introduction of some more American transports up from Sea Zone 91, which went north instead of south. Dropped all sorts of additional homies there in Europe. U.S. has now started its long-threatened bombing campaign with max damage rolls on the factory in the capital, damaging, but not very much, the radar towers as well to lessen the potential of the interceptors. There was an interception raid, and I think I shot down one of his planes. He shot down one of mine. There was a bombing raid also in Western with the British bomber that didn't fare as well. It got shot down by the AAs, so there's only the remaining damage on there from before, but there has just been an enormous amount of industrial damage on the board since our rules provide for damage every time a factory changes hands. Up north, the Norwegian contingent is getting a little bit more uppity and starting to walk forward there towards Leningrad, while the British are trying to circle the Black Sea there and slip by the Germans, perhaps hoping that they're not watching. While on the Asian side of things, there is a coordinated effort, to no one's surprise, to use those transports to land and reinforce the flagging Indian and Chinese armies. So the two large naval contingents here both slipped into this sea zone, dropped everything that they could into French Indochina, which at the moment still belongs to the French, and flirted with invading Hong Kong and wiping out my bomber fleet, but that the odds were slightly against that and chose to do the safer defensive route instead. Speaking of defense, the Australians didn't leave without first spreading a fleet of 4 different destroyers ringing around the Pacific just to make sure the Japanese don't get any funny ideas about invading Alaska or Hawaii or the Carolinas or anything of that sort. Rest assured that all of those ideas have occurred to me, but probably were not on the table. But you never know. You leave the Carolinas open with all those land units. It's a tempting little target there. But anyhow, the transports are the only things we're keeping on the board. Those navies are represented by these big old blow-up boxes here, which have plenty going on and will give the Japanese plenty to think about on turn 11. Well, we're halfway through turn 11, and the Axis did all right for themselves. The Germans have once again pulled everything they could into Italy, southern Italy, try to hold on to Rome. Will not let Rome fall if they can help it, but boy, there's some Americans there thinking otherwise. There was some reorganization. For once, we did not take the no man's land through Paris, so we allowed the Allies to hold on to that, meaning that the Parisians are going to have money to spend this turn. And nevertheless, the Germans did quite a bit of building into west of Germany. You can see the 3 green, but that's what, 36 infantry and some other stuff. Little bit of reorientation here and there, stuff moving around, up and down. Finally got rid of the British scourge. The Egyptian scourge in Romania has come to an end, as well as these incursions up here. Germans flexing a little bit of muscle there, while the Japanese do the same on the Asian mainland. So for another turn, we get the China bonus, having held onto that so far, building a military base there to add just a little bit of reinforcement, and we're going to need every bit that we can get now that the Allies have come in and dumped everything in Vietnam. The Japanese, though, have come and reset the balance a little bit with this move. So part of what the Allies had counted on were these 5 transports in the Carolines to be able to threaten the mainland and hold the Japanese Navy back, and or to shift all of these land units into French Indochina to support their brethren. No doubt that was probably the long-term plan. And these Anzac destroyers were all for the purpose, of course, of preventing the Navy from getting to the Carolines. and they couldn't get to the Carolines, but we were able to pull off this move here, sacrificing a carrier and a plane to get that plane down there in Carolines, strafe the naked transports. So we're paying dearly for it. That's 26 in IPCs, plus we threw a transport down there to get one of our islands back. But yeah, I still have a whole lot left to do here on turn 11. Turn 12 dawns on the Allies, making still further inroads into Eurasia. The Americans, while they continue to grease the wheels of the gravy train here coming in from the eastern U.S., they've directed all those land units up into Europe. Just a couple there in Morocco, thus taking pressure off Rome for the time being. There are just an enormous number of dudes there in Normandy. Did you take France's turn, by the way? You didn't take France's turn yet, did you? Or no?
Take France. I own France.
But did you take their turn?
Yeah.
Okay.
They built a naval base.
Oh, the French are the ones that build the naval base.
Yeah, because they own French Indochina.
Right. Yeah, okay. That caught me off guard. I was expecting French units to show up, but okay. So anyway, things that you don't normally hear. France building a naval base in Vietnam. Anyhow, here's where we are. Pretty much equal balance as there's been for this latter half of the game. There's a whole lot of smoke here because those bombers have been dropping max damage on that factory in West Germany. Now max damage on the air base and naval base. I don't know, for giggles, I guess. Not like I'm shooting off a Navy anytime soon. Still some damage in the capital as well. Pulled back from the brink in Norway, but breaking through down here, you'll see left too much vulnerability in Volgograd, and there was too much built up in the Middle East. So they were able to punch on through to the other side while continuing to generate some forces down here. The Allies in the Pacific, the operative word this turn has been shuck, because this little naval encampment here in Hainan, while equally matched to the Japanese Navy, neither can take the other out just yet. So they've got a safe little haven to be shucking. The Americans have been building 2 or at least 1 infantry per turn out of that military base in the Philippines that the Omega rules give them. And now they're in a position to shuck 2 or 4 at a time into Indochina. The Brits did the same thing here in Borneo. No doubt plan to start doing the same thing from India now that France has gone out of their way to build a naval base for them in Indochina. Or at least to be able to project wherever they want to go. Australia starting to position more contributions to the Navy. Oh, did you not use your builds?
Place them, yeah.
Okay.
Although that should be a destroyer, not a transport. Though.
No, well, because
We'll fix them because
obviously they're so distinct. Yeah.
Right.
So destroyer and a couple planes coming up for Anzac. Those Anzac destroyers that were blocking the Pacific starting to coalesce around Hawaii. 1 transport was built in the Pacific for reasons.
One here and one up there.
Yeah. So yeah, because he did build a naval base in Hawaii, so he's been building transports straight out of there too. Anyhow, here's where we're at. The naval stalemate in the Pacific is locked in right now. With Australia contributing new naval units more or less every turn, while the Japanese have to split their money between naval units to keep parity and try to get over the curve to where they could pull off an attack, and now land units out of Hong Kong to balance the forces that were coming in. Now, we've played this game before. You'll remember just a few turns ago when the Japanese Navy was down here, able to expend all of its air force to wipe out the combined Indian-Chinese stack. And it's certainly in a position of strength where it is, and has a military base in Xikang, so it can start to contribute from both sides of China. Of course, if Germany can't get Volgograd under control, that's going to be a problem in terms of being able to pierce into Russia from the Allied perspective. And this little shucker here in the Med is bringing 2 infantry a turn into Greece. Germany's starting to do something about it, but can they do enough? Unturned. Day 4 of gameplay dawns as we are halfway through turn 12. The Axis have done what they could do on the board as it exists. First of all, by doing what I should have done as the Italian player 2 turns ago, which is sending a plane over to just pop that transport out of C-Zone 99. It took me too long to figure that move out, and that's why we have British on the mainland in the first place. But nevertheless, we assembled the team of Germans to root them out, flying in infantry from both Western Germany and Rome as paratroopers, as well as sending in that tank and some bomber support, able to bomb them out. A few stragglers coming from different directions to help out in Volgograd, including 3 of the German bomber fleet to make that support. These bombers now being supported by our friendly Japanese allies in German Kazakhstan. As we make a couple builds, I rolled into that Blitz Tactics tech several turns ago, and even though I didn't have a single mech on the board at the time on turn 6, since then I've been building into the whole mech artillery combination, and I gotta say, it's helpful, it works. Making whatever builds we could in Germany proper, including, as the IPCs worked out, in pillbox in the capital, just in case. Gotta keep that territory defended as well as possible, taking some of the no man's lands territories this time around. On the Japanese front, we went all subs, trying to invest in the naval battle and tip the balance in our favor here, and also thought, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if we sent those Japanese strat bombers, escorted by all these fighters, to come bomb this naval base that the French just built. French are all happy with that naval base. Let's bomb it. And yeah, that was not a good idea. Even though it has a max damage of 6, and even though it's going to be a minute before the French have money to fix it, I nevertheless lost 2 strat bombers to the AA guns. So that math did not work out. 6 damage for 24 IPCs investment. Remember, if you want to strat bomb something, don't do it, because dead bombers is what results. Every single time it seems like a good idea, it doesn't work out. It's working out pretty well for the Allies so far this turn, but it doesn't work out for me, ever. So don't do it. Now we get to see what the Allies do in the rest of turn 12. Well, as we reach unlucky number 13 on the turn dial, we have elected to call the game. Now, before the internet gets all upset with us for calling a game that still has a ton of Axis pieces on it, let's walk through the reasoning. So, for one thing, the way that victory is measured under the Omega rules is by victory tokens, and you have to get at least 4 and win by 2. Right now, the Axis hold 2. Well, that's not even true. We used to have 2. We're down to 1 now, because every time I lose Paris, that gives me less than 7 victory cities on the European map. So every time I take Paris, I get that token back. every time I lose it, I don't. So right now I don't have it. I'm sure I would have it again at this turn. That's fine. I also have a victory token for holding Moscow. The Allies have, they currently hold 2. They had the 1 for the island hopping. I took it back by occupying Okinawa. You got the 1 for liberating Paris, right?
Yeah.
So you would have to get that one back, which you do every turn. And then which other one do you have?
Africa.
Africa, yeah, having all the non-neutral territories in Africa. So what's about to happen on turn 13, the Germans will take back France. They will have to expend even more resources opening up northern Italy so that they can slide those fast movers back into Rome to try and reinforce it from this invasion here, which, you know, that's 5 tanks, 5 guys, but also potentially supported by 7 strat bombers.
Yeah.
So, you know, he can roll in, take Rome. There's nothing I can do. I could throw all my Germans, all my German planes into Rome, and that's my only shot of saving it this turn. But even if I did that, then I'm opening up Berlin. So I'm not going to do that, which means he's going to take Rome. That's another victory token. He's going to take Paris back this turn. So by the end of this turn, he will hold Paris. And also on the U.S. turn, or the Anzacs, if it takes that, they'll shoot somebody up to take Okinawa. So at the end of the turn, they will hold 4 victory tokens, and they will win the game. So under the rules, the way the victory is measured, I think an Allied victory is inevitable on turn 13. Even if that were not the case, the tide is turning irrevocably against the Axis for a few reasons. The strat bombing campaign, like while I've been surviving it and making enough money by holding all of Russia, I'm making 60 something every turn. So I'm able to fix the factories and build stuff. And that's been keeping me alive all this time. It's just not, you know, enough to get ahead of the curve. I can do things like I wanted to do. I wanted to take this huge stack into France, and if he throws everything at it, he probably kills it. But does that dilapidate his, you know, on the ground presence enough that I can come back from it? Maybe. But, you know, then I lose. If I do that, I lose Western Germany. He piles everything into that. He can land planes into that. That's the back and forth that I've been struggling with the whole game and just not able to get a hold of that. I honestly, you know, so in these stacks that came down from Normandy, we were just talking about that. Yeah, I was able to send some bombers and just wipe out the one stack that was in Finland, and that, you know, sent him back and made him a little bit nervous about doing that. I do think that if he had sent both the Russian and the UK stack and reinforced that, I don't think I could have kept him out of Leningrad. And he breaks through Leningrad and then holds a factory there. I have a hard time holding that. Just like what happened with Volgograd here. I had a good little beef up, and he was able to build up enough in the Middle East to punch through that, take it over. I had to throw everything at it in kind of a desperation move almost. And, you know, obviously I would have taken it now and taken it back. But he's got now this stack that's broken through in reach of China at the same time that the Allied stack on this side is breaking through and into China. So even with my little military base and my factory down here, that's not going to be enough. This turn I was probably going to invest on the land with Japan in order to fight back land and air. I lost a couple bombers, which sucked. Even if I'd gone all Navy, though, the way that the Navy's shaping up, so you see they've pulled back this turn to the Philippines, where they have a home base with a naval base, a place for planes to land, a place for planes to scramble from. So my odds were not in my favor. If I kept building naval units, I still would have been at about parity with them because they have a Australian carrier, another American carrier, which is going to take a couple turns to get there, yes, but then this stack is going to pull back to the Carolines, and maybe that's victory enough. Maybe that gets us back to the balance we've had most of the game here with Japan. I don't know that I would go chasing them into the Carolines. I think that I would say, haha, I got you out of Asia. Now I'm going to turn around and deal with this stack. But with both of these stacks now coming into China, with Calcutta unimpeded and sending troops in. Okay, yes, maybe I send some transports around now that I've gotten this freed up and I'm able to take up some Indian territories. It would be a fight, but I think I'm behind the curve on that. Again, moot point because they're going to take all 4 victory tokens this turn. But I think I'm a little bit behind the curve here. I don't know. This is honestly close to me. Not necessarily Axis favorite. I'm not like trashed by any means, but I do think that Japan's just going to have a hard time, especially since Germany's going to have a hard time. And it's slow. You know, if there wasn't a victory token issue and we kept playing this out, it would take a while just because I'm still getting all this Russian money. That's what's kept me alive. And that was part of the strategy the whole time, is get the Russian money, and that can fund a comeback in Germany. In retrospect, should I have gone for broke into France instead of keeping the stack in Western Germany and let him come get me, let him attack me, let him exhaust all of his on-continent presence? Maybe. I just felt like every turn I didn't quite have the stack that I needed in order to hold that ground. I honestly think so. Every turn I'm calculating my buys based on what he can pour into Berlin. Every turn, dude, I expected you to send the Americans up to take Denmark, send all the British Navy into the sea zone up here, and just pile everything you could. The thing that kept me able to defend Berlin was that you never built more British transports. You only said 5 British transports, which limited what you can bring into Berlin. I think if you had spent the turn building all transports for the UK, which is really what I expected you to do from turn 1, and dump those into Berlin. I mean, I can only build so much in Berlin. And you're coming up here. Honestly, like, you could spend one turn bringing your whole fleet into Sea Zone 113 and building more ships out of your major factory right into 113, which is also something I expected you to do as soon as you built that factory. I don't think I could have kept up with that. I know that my 6 bombers kind of scared you off from doing that, and like since my planes now have jet power and they attack at a 4, I mean, yeah, that was big. I think that if you spent a couple turns building up your Navy and then put them into 113, I don't think even that Air Force could have kept up with it. I don't know what your thoughts were on why you didn't pursue that strategy.
Well, because I pursued a different strategy, which was slower and more contemplative, which was have a landing ground here to constantly be pouring units in from the US and from the UK that are all protected from protect the Navy with scramble here, planes here, couldn't come in. I always wanted to maintain enough naval support here to make sure that you couldn't do something to wipe out all those units. As long as I did that, I was able to constantly be pouring stuff in here. Now, there was a huge investment that I had to make, both in Navy to do this and in bombers to get the bomber run. So my strategy the whole game, you know, I'm not as smart and contemplative as you are, but I can count, is if I make more money and buy more units, then over time I'm going to have the advantage. And so you're right, you can keep up with the bombing campaign because you're making $60, but if you have to spend 10, 15, 20 bucks every turn to be wiping off damage, that's just money that you're pissing away. And all I need in the long run is to do this, start denying these, this guy's gonna start coming up here, that guy's coming over here, just to chew off twosies and threesies up there. The next part, these guys were gonna start coming over here, just to turn the economic tide. Because I mean, if you look at where we're at on the board, right? I mean, I know it's the beginning of the turn and you're gonna take these back, and that's a swing of 7 for Germany. I mean, the US is still well ahead of Germany. Germany's bonuses on the board are plus 15, the US's are plus 35. So that's plus 30 US v Germany. Here, you know, again, I know you'll be a little higher at the end of your turn because we just finished my cycle, but the UK is still ahead of Japan. You get plus 5 or 6 for China, but that's it. I'm getting plus 15, something like that, for all the bonuses there. So they're closer up here, and that doesn't even account for the fact that Anzac's got 30, India's got 21, China's, I don't know if they're supposed to be 4 or 5, but Italy's basically turned off.
Oh, Italy's dead.
Because of the submarines convoying everything that Italy has.
Which always happens.
Which always happens. If you lose control of the Med, you're going to lose all of Italy's sort of ability. So, yeah, I mean, long run, I probably am going to do exactly what you said and leverage in these units and those units to put enough pressure points on you where you can't do it. If I did what you had suggested earlier and you survived sort of and were able to repel it, it would come at absolute naval wipe off of all of that investment, pouring through over there. It would set me back 10, 12 turns. Just seemed like a riskier contemplation than just taking the guaranteed spots where I knew I could continue to reinforce over the long run. And as long as I don't make any cataclysmic mistakes, the economics will just tell me that I'm going to have more pieces on the board than you are. I just got to make sure I don't move into a kill box and let you wipe out 100 or 150 IPCs worth of pieces, either because you're lucky on the dice or because I'm stupid and don't see something like the damn plane that went over and sunk 5 transports, which that's not cataclysmic in the grand scheme of things, right? But that's 35 IPCs that I just wasted. So I try to, more than anything, just minimize the stupid mistakes, stay ahead of the economic curve, and keep pawing units to get onto the ground somewhere. And as long as I can hit enough pieces of the board, like 1, 2, threaten here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you just can't keep up with them. You're going to lose the economic advantage on parts of the board, which is going to, in the long run, let me know. And I actually think that's the only reason why I won the game when you took Russia as quickly as you did, is because in the Omega rules, sort of Russia itself is a bonus, but in order to take it as quickly as you took it in this game, you have to do it to the exclusion of your other bonuses and to the exclusion of denying the allies their bonuses. And so when you took Russia, I was getting all my max bonuses for almost all of the countries. And so I was able to build up all around the edges of the map while you were eating the middle of the map and stay ahead of the curve. I mean, I guess that's sort of, I don't think I'm lighting the world on fire by saying you have to be aggressive with the Axis and you have to be contemplative and slow and strategic with the Allies. But I might think that there was too much aggression if you waited to take Russia just a little, instead of 5, turn 7 and took it with Japan. Attack with this way with Germany and then the second wave attack with Japan to wipe it off, so that you're getting this bonus, you're a little stronger there, and you've done some more to slow up the Allies getting some of their other bonuses. And it's easy for me to say theoretically without mapping it out. I don't ever play the Axis, but that's my thought. I mean, I don't know, we'll see how it works. The G-hole thing that you have started doing by building a little strip there to support paratrooping invasions in China is pretty max aura. I mean, that's clutch because it lets you take China so much quicker. It allows you to put pressure everywhere you want. Super efficient. When you upgrade it to an air base, then suddenly you can start power projecting paratroopers and planes all throughout the Pacific, which, allows you to dictate what you want to do and keeping me out of that area. So I can't imagine there's a lot of strategies that won't involve that in the early game. I'm not saying don't do that. But I think you have to think of some way to nip a bonus here or there. I mean, just by way of example in this game, right? Malaya is pretty clutch because that's a Anzac bonus and it's half of a Indian bonus. I own the money islands the entire game other than the 1 or 2 turns that you stuck into Borneo, and then I had to repel that. That stupid Dutch island, that's a critical to a bonus. There's some island that you also take that always, like, it's that stupid one down there that, like, UK or one of the islands
Gilbert's or something.
Gilbert's or something ends up being like 5 IPC swing or some stupid thing.
Right,
like,
we've done that before.
You have to takes like 5 turns to get over there and actually do it. If you do it earlier, then you're boning yourself on a variety of other things. It's just like little onesies and twosies to not give me those bonuses, so that you could get ahead of the curve. But I don't know. I think you're dangerously close to figuring out a Axis strategy that's gonna let you take Russia pretty quickly and not let me climb back into it.
Well, this was an intentional experiment. The entire purpose of my strategy of this game, as we said before, was called No Sleep Till Moscow. It was balls out, ignore all the distractions, get as many pieces to Moscow as quickly as possible, forget everything else, and then deal with it later. So that is what we executed. And I think I at least accomplished what I meant to do, to see if that could be a viable strategy. And we see it made the Axis strong enough to be, this far into the game. It's been, the longer it goes, it always favors the Allies, right? But it's been competitive this far into the game. It's taken us 4 days to play this game. But it ultimately suffers from all those weaknesses that you described. I look back and I'm thinking, there are roles that didn't go well with the bombing rate here. There are,
Hats off to the AA guns this game. Like, they were killing things left and right.
Oh my goodness, so many AA hits.
It's like 1 of 6. I bet you it was like 5 of 6 AA guns would hit throughout the game.
Totally
ridiculous. Both sides too. It's not one or the other.
So in a game, ruled by dice, you're always going to get diced sometimes, and that's if you've got a strategy that relies on good dice rolls, then it's a bad strategy. But so there were rules like that, but the point I'm inartfully getting to is that I don't think the outcome of this game was determined by 1 or 2 bad rolls. Or, frankly, any huge mistakes. Mistakes were made on both sides. I should have knocked out your transport earlier, for example. And you exposed your transports when you didn't mean to. But I don't think any of those things determined the outcome of the game such that, this strategy would have gone differently otherwise.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What was the thought on here to leave? Like, you didn't attack any of the Navy at all with sort of the Air Force or any of the opening naval units. So you conceded right out of the gate that I was going to own the Atlantic, and that also meant that I did not need to have as much down in the Spain Sea Zone 91 or whatever that is down there between Spain and Morocco. I could lightly defend that and still have all my transports coming in because there's no sort of threat in the Atlantic. I understand sort of the general idea, which is you didn't want to lose any German planes because you wanted as many planes as humanly possible for Moscow. You don't usually lose that many, 1 or 2 maybe. Lose your Navy, sure, but at least this Navy's crippled up.
You're
keeping
talking
that Navy-
G1.
Yeah, G1. That's what. Yeah, so like because I have that Navy, I'm allowed to do this crap, right? If you took without that Navy, if I had to build into it, it would give you more turns maybe on G5, G6, G7 to do some more stuff because I can't dump over units there. I have to build up that capacity to do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was an understood consequence of the choice, but it was a fundamental part of the choice. And I'll tell you, the reason why wasn't necessarily the planes. I mean, as it turned out, I lost 2 planes to your AA guns in France anyway, right? The reason was the land units. I was taking France with as few land units as possible. And all the ones that I used came from Belgium, ones that couldn't make it to Moscow by G5 anyway. Normally when I take France without planes, because I'm afraid of the AA gun, I'm using all the tanks and mechs that are in Germany, that are in greater southern Germany. And then now that's 2 more turns it takes them to get to Moscow. The entire purpose of keeping the planes back was so that all these land units that normally go into France could go east instead. That's the only way I was able to get enough to Moscow by G5. And G5 was my goal from the beginning. And that's what worked out. So I feel like I did exactly what I intended to do.
Makes sense. I mean, if you're going G5 and speed's the goal, then that makes sense. No one's ever done the Romania factory. I wonder if you're talking a G7 where you're boom, having that Romania factory to build up and into. Although I don't know you need it as much if you can just take the Ukraine factory, fix it, and then build out of there because it's, under the older rules, it would degrade to a minor. You've still got a major there. So maybe, that strategy that people talk about on the internet, you don't really need as much because you already have industrial capacity there and industrial capacity there. But those are the side quests that you were talking about that you avoided.
Exactly, yeah. I didn't want to spend any money, move any piece that detracted me from getting my max possible to Moscow on G5. Now, whether I went the southern route or the northern route, like through Ukraine or through Belarus, I left open, frankly, depending on what you did. Because depending on how your moves were out of Leningrad, I could have conceivably cut you off if I had gone north, but you held back and made it to where you couldn't get there by G5 anyway. I forget the exact layout of the board at the beginning, but it just turned out to be more productive for me to go the southern route. But yeah, I actually did contemplate the Romanian thing. Like, you can spend all 30 on an industrial complex there, turn 1, or you can spend 15 on a minor. But just math-wise, like, you have to build that turn 1, produce from it turn 2, and then, only starts moving onto the board turn 3. I just compared that to what I could otherwise get there by spending money on pieces that could get there out of Germany, right? So I built...
Units take territory, not factories. So if you got to move quick, then you got to build the units.
Well, that's right. Like, just long term, like, would they get more units down there? Maybe, but yeah, it would take several more turns, right? Like, I built mechs out of Germany the first turn because they can move too, right? And then I built planes because they could get there in time. Every buy, every move that I made was calculated to get the most there possible as soon as possible. And we see the result. If different choices were made by either side along the way, maybe the result would have been different. But I think that we both played, you played, obviously, the response as well as could be played. And I tried to at least execute the thrust of the strategy and then see what happened with it. And I think I at least accomplished what I was trying to do. So I think this tells you that you're exactly right. All the very predictable downsides for the Axis and allowing the UK Navy to build up, allowing you to get all your bonuses and everything, that ultimately probably prevents you from winning, at least not very easily.
And I guess the other thing I would say, and I don't know if it would be outcome determinative because how quickly you move. Turn 1, when you went in here, I counter-striked
Yep.
with a pretty sizable piece and lost planes and a bunch of ground units. And I know better than that after playing Russia for as long as I did. If I would have just conceded that territory and started the withdrawal back, and then had a bigger stack with, a few more planes, I don't know what that would have done with the odds. Whether that would have slowed you down enough for the U.S. then to start picking at your heels before you could take it.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect probably not, only because, like, if you remember the board, like, there was a Japanese horde just absolutely coming. So I think that maybe it wouldn't have been 5, maybe it would have been 6, but Germany would have pounced, and then Japan would have pounced. So I was going to lose that no matter what, and make no mistake, I lost Moscow turn 1 when I just missed away all those units. And again, it's another situation where you were talking about you got diced. I mean, I had planes that got diced up here that went in, and I had odds to win. I didn't even win this battle, as I recall. So that was rough. I had 2 or 3 strat bombs, just single strat bombs, different parts of the game for UK bombers. AA gun just picked out of the air. Like, every time you go in with one bomber, you should just automatically throw it in the garbage because you're not going to win that one. Which is why I had built, you have to sort of build them in 4 so that even if you lose one, they're still coming in to do something.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what I did with Japan in Indochina, right? But I still lost 2, and those were 2 I couldn't really afford.
Frambo!
Right. Also, I mean, your Russia 1 moves helped me with this strategy. I mean, you didn't know what I was going to do because I haven't done this before, but your Siberian stack, what was the thinking in not moving those west immediately? You hung out, you moved 1 eastward, and then the 2 just kind of hung out. Like, I showed you, like, ahead of time when I mapped this out with my G-hole base and the whole conga line of Japanese troops coming across North China saying, forget about South China, we'll deal with it later. That was all calculated on your stack getting to Tunguska and Novosibirsk before I could get to Moscow and me having to deal with them there. As it was, I was able to march those Japanese straight to Moscow unimpeded. I didn't even have to ever set off the Mongolian rule because, you were never in Tunguska.
So this is a side effect of only playing the game a couple times a year as opposed to playing it all the time, which is I almost never, and I mean almost never, go Pacific first and try to pour money into the Pacific in the early game. And I sort of, in my head, knew I wanted to try that just to see if I could come up with something that would do something. Instead, I came up with maybe the most boring game possible of just buying naval units and building up and building up and building up until, turn 9 or 10, when all those units suddenly became effective. And my thought on keeping part of the Russian anchor up here was, if I'm going to go heavy into the Pacific, I wanted these units to stay up here, some of the units to stay up here to have to worry about this coming down and not moving all the way down. I obviously didn't contemplate that you were never going to move any units down anyways, that all of your planes were just going to sit there, and so you just absolutely wipe these dudes off the map. Like, that was kind of a piss poor move. I should have left them back a little bit so that I could have, the idea was have a stack here so that I could keep those in there, thinking that you're going to move your force down here as you typically do before we started G-holing it up, where your focus is on the South Pacific, just to have another anchor of something that you had to worry about. In typically I've been able to slow up advances into Russia a little bit where I didn't need as many guys because I can get planes coming up this way or this way from the UK. So I wanted to try a little something different. That was a piss poor idea. That was dumb. I won't do that again. Keep those guys out of the range of the planes. And, I guess, again, not lighting the world on fire with this little tidbit of knowledge, you need to come in as the Allies player with 4 or 5 different strategies. Not one strategy, like this is the game, I'm going to do that. because you got to respond to what the German player does first. I mean, when you said, I'm attacking Russia, that says the signal that it's gonna be Moscow or bust. Probably if you're doing that, you're gonna have to have support from the Japanese. So I should have thought better of where it was, moved some of those guys back. And truth be told, I probably should have just done what I always do, which is go kill Germany first, so that I'm building up massively over here, so that when you actually get in to Moscow, I'm already landing. It took me a couple of extra turns to build up that infrastructure, which is one of the reasons why Germany got to be as strong. So now, of course, if you go, you always get what we get in the majority of our games, which is a Japan that is out of control, absurd, and ridiculous. Japan does not get out of control and absurd and ridiculous until later in the game, when they're only going up this way and through China, because they're foregoing the money islands, they're foregoing Southeast Asia, and so there's more time to do some of that. So I guess, if I was thinking to myself, I should be more flexible and not try to do a strategy just to do a strategy, but build up that strategy and have it in my back pocket when the time presents itself. That would have been better off. But so the short answer is, why did I break up that stack and do that way? Because I was stupid.
Well, it's not stupid. It's just that I caught you by surprise. Like just a couple of games ago when I did my America First strategy, right? You didn't see that coming because we'd never done it before. I have actually done a G1 attack into Russia, I think once, game 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever it is, lose track. But I didn't even go back and watch that video. I know it didn't go as well. This one was calculated to be a little bit more efficient. But it's been so long since I did something like that even if I attacked Russia turn 1, you didn't necessarily see the combination happening. But I was actually banking on the fact of you going Germany first, since that's what you always do. And so that's why I didn't pull the U.S. into the game, because I needed Germany to have as much space as possible to come back and reinforce before you got there with the U.S. Had I attacked earlier with Japan, had I brought the U.S. into the game a turn or 2 or even 3 earlier, I could have probably still gotten into Moscow G5, but then I'm losing Europe a lot quicker. So that was the calculation anyway.
Yeah, I guess one other side note is I'm increasingly coming around to the idea where Japan's not attacking the U.S. for that reason, that turn 2 or 3, depending on where your map board is, having the UK declare war to trigger some of those India bonuses earlier, and you need war for the Anzac to get some of those bonuses. I ended up declaring war on Japan early here for that reason. I don't know that there's a lot of strategic wisdom to having a default attack Japan, because they can jack you up pretty quick with no penalty of bringing the U.S. in. But you got to pick and choose your spots. Another sort of pick and choose your spot was, I was eyeing, as I do every game, Spanish beachhead, which I love me some Spanish beachhead, because you don't have to boop, 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 boop. You just
right.
It's so much more efficient to chop off half of your supply line. Hard to do when you've got a monstrous thing here. You can come down and get these guys, you get these guys, you can't just give it away. But now that these guys are sort of wardened off, and these guys are wardened off, these guys are wardened off, I was pretty quickly looking at conquering factory, start building directly out of there, and then, if need be, that also then would allow me to get some more IPCs down there, some more IPCs on some of these neutrals in the Middle East. You get enough, you need to clean that up. You have to clean this up if you're going to beachhead. You can't just do it in a vacuum. But, it's little things that, there are rules that, you should almost never attack strict neutrals. Almost never, right? You should almost never declare war on Japan. Almost never. Some of the when do you break the rules?
For sure.
good to have in your back pocket.
I actually thought that you might declare war with India and Anzac early. You did end up doing that. I thought you might even do it a turn earlier. Just because once it becomes evident that Japan's focused on northern China like that, like when they're going Moscow first,
Yeah.
India's got nothing to worry about. Why not do that?
Right.
Because India is always going to be my problem in that situation anyway, right? It's just like Germany letting the UK go crazy. I'm letting the UK go crazy here. So why not take full advantage of that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you're right. The turn that Anzac declared war to get its bonuses, it was that same turn that I should have declared war
Right.
by India and gotten, I think it's +3.
Yeah.
It's not a huge, it's not like tide turning. Oh my God, that cost me 2 or 3. But again, it's a game of inches. Every little bonus helps. Every little infantry guy helps in the long run. You need more pieces, and you don't want to just throw them away. Anything you can do to gain an inch of ground, you've got to be thinking about how to do that. So I
Right.
do agree that I should have to. And what happened between India's turn and Anzac's turn? Italy went.
No,
who
nothing.
cares?
There's literally no, because they're essentially the same turn. There's literally no reason not to do it with India if you're going to do it with Anzac.
Yep.
So it was just one turn too late, but it obviously didn't make that huge of a difference. I forget exactly what the board state was at that point, but it might have allowed you to break into China with some Indian troops a turn earlier, which frankly would have made a noticeable difference in my ability to conquer that stack.
Maybe. I mean, I knew that. I put that stack though in harm's way. One, because there was enough there that it offensively wiped out a bunch of ground units, and then even when you went in to take the stack out, I had to degrade your ground force. That giant Chinese stack is not designed to last the game.
Mm-hmm.
The giant Chinese stack is designed to cripple up the number of Japanese units on the ground, but you can only do that by strategically deciding when you're going to deploy it. Because if you just hide it in a corner, it's going to get wiped out by the
Sure.
20 Japanese planes and a monstrous stack of units. You're not going to get any value from the stack.
No, you gotta make me deal with it. You kind of, pull me around like a magnet because I have to line up around you and make all my moves and purchases with the idea of getting rid of that when I could be doing other things.
Sort of my overall ally strategy is always make sure that every Axis player has 3 things they need to do and only the ability to do 2 of them.
Yeah. Well, I was certainly in that position for many, many turns. So that's that. I do think that, we should be, from an ally perspective, a lot more open to early declarations of war by India in certain circumstances. Especially, it comes up a lot, I guess, recently because most of my strategies recently have been delay getting the U.S. in the game. I mentioned to you that I was debating between 2 strategies for this game, and the other one was opposite. The other one would have been involved a J1, which would have pulled the U.S. in, obviously, right away, and that would have been an entirely different game. But this has been a strategy that's been on my mind for a few years, and I needed to execute it to see how it worked.
Yeah, and everyone, who watches this and ever watched our videos knows that, if we have 20 videos, I was the allies, like 18 or 19 of those games.
Mm-hmm.
I suck at playing the Axis, so all tips I give for Axis players should be taken with a grain of salt when I say shit like, all you had to do was this or that. It's like, yeah, it's easy for me to say.
Right.
I don't have to move the pieces on the board. I'm just thinking about it from the, if this, that would have been a problem here. So,
Right.
yeah, the combination on the Japanese side and the German side is the whole game. And I always think to myself, I don't know why you don't do more to keep Italy in the game longer. And I mean, of course, the answer is because then you're not doing what you need to be doing with Germany to deal with all the threats on that side of the board. But, Italy always turns into just an absolute basket case.
Right.
And you get a handful of subs there and it's game over for them.
Yeah, well, but when you're always Tarantoing first turn, right? And usually you're going to do Taranto to Brook on, but I think, did you not do Tobruk because I took out that cruiser?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I did it. And I think that's going to probably happen more often, to be frank.
Normally we're throwing all those subs up north, but that cruiser allows you to do that move every time before I can do anything as Italy. So there's not a lot I can do. When Germany's doing a protect Italy at all costs strategy, you know, it requires a lot different moves, and I should probably, you know, I've played with it before, and I should probably incorporate that a little bit more often, but Italy's always going to be the weak point.
Yeah, and it's once the Med's lost, the Med's lost. You know, I guess that's also part of the problem is if you're investing heavy, you know, if you're investing to keep the Med alive, for Italy to be alive, the U.S. can go in there and sort of jack that up, turn 5, 6, 7. So at some point, it might just be that you're going to lose the Med if the U.S. wants you to lose the Med and to go chop off that Italian leg, because their Navy's going to be so big in Russia, because you're not attacking Russia, because you're in the Med building naval units or whatever to help Italy out, or putting stuff down there. Russia becomes so big that they can't do any, you can't really deal with them. So there might just be nothing you can do, or maybe we need to think of some way to buff Italy a little bit somewhere on the in the rules, because they're a problem when they're can't deal with them. But
yeah, I mean, they were decently strong for a while. They were getting several bonuses, but that's just because, you know, you were biding your time doing other things before you got to them. I mean, the beginning of the game, when the momentum favors the Axis, they're going to look good for a while, but they're not fundamentally strong.
yeah, I guess maybe that's the issue, is you got to use the Italians early when they're still viable before they become crippled up.
Well, and another thing, too, is it's almost impossible to keep you out of the Middle East and getting all your bonuses, like, by turn 2, right? You've occupied all of Persia. Every turn, it doesn't, even if you know I'm going to do a Calcutta crush, for Pete's sake, you still have time to come send your transports in, take all the Persian territories, wipe out Iraq. You know, usually build a factory there like you did. Like, this is like the longest it's taken you to build a factory in the Middle East for a long time. And then this becomes such a source of revenue and power projection for you that it's a big problem. I don't remember the last time my Axis forces have gotten into the Middle East.
It's the part on the board that's the farthest away from your concentrated power sources, so it makes the most sense to base Allied power projection out of there, because it takes so long for you to get there. It's the farthest away, which is the reason why I do it almost every game. I mean, you know, Middle Earth, you know, shot out General Hand Grenade. You know, it's one of the base packages of Allied strategies that I almost go to every game because it's almost always available. You know, here you're saying it took me longer to build that factory than I normally. Sure, that's exactly right, because I actually could do stuff in London. I mean, in most games where they have no Navy, no power projection capability, they're just prisoners on a big island. You need somewhere else, another base of operations to get up and going, which is why I always build there and project up from that direction. Here I was actually able to do something from that source of power, so
Yeah,
didn't need to build it.
fair enough. All right, I think we have sufficiently deconstructed the game. Any parting thoughts?
You know, if anyone has made it this far into this video and has some thoughts on different sort of pieces of strategies to think about that you've played and work particularly good. I've seen some games like online where I look at the board and there's like a bunch of Japanese markers and South American stuff. I'm like, it never even occurs to me to like how that happens, or like who lets the Japanese sail over there or whatever. But, you know, I'm sure someone's thought out some, you know, I'm going Rio de Janeiro first strategy or some shit. You know, send it along. I'd love to, you know, sort of have more pieces to, more strategic pieces to think about to build into a toolbox.
I mean, we have had a game where that happened, but that was so ridiculously broken by that point.
Yeah.
And plus, I mean, some of our earlier games had crazy stuff like that because we weren't playing under our Omega rules, right?
Sure.
Playing out of box, and so that's why we have the rule set that we do to try to keep things balanced and interesting. So
We have a couple of interesting thoughts on deck for balancing the rules for 3.6, 3.7, and maybe even Omega 4.1 if we have some of the bigger stuff that we're in contemplation. So stay tuned for future videos and releases.
yeah, that's right. We are contemplating some major updates and expansions of the Omega rules into a 4.0 set that creates even more options than what we have now, because this whole effort is designed to make the game as tweaked and interesting and balanced as possible. So definitely welcome the input.
If anyone has house rules that they've got that they like that are particularly good, throw them in the comments so we can look at them and see if we could integrate some of those thoughts.
Right. Yeah. You will have already seen that, I've been exploring BBR lately. Some good ideas in there. We would have loved to get a game of that in this year. This one took so long to play that's probably not going to happen soon. But
I have pledged to come to Michigan to play BBR before the year's out, so there'll be more videos coming on that at least.
you heard it here first, Internet. You hold them up to it. And hopefully we'll have that video for you before the end of the year. So, peace out. Anybody who's still listening, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for clicking subscribe. And we'll see you next time.